sobriety and out of an underlying conviction that we exist to serve. We serve in the good times and we serve in the bad times. That is what it is to put our name on a ballot. And this, Mr. Speaker, happens to be the bad times. But it doesn't mean that we run and hide. It doesn't mean that we stay within the safety of our own homes. It means that we as 338 privileged individuals who have been sent here to be the voices of our constituents, we come and we sit and we look after our country. As Mark Bosch, former acting clerk of the House, said, the House of Commons needs to be functioning and seen to be functioning. It is an essential service to the country. Members of Parliament are essential workers. We need to be functioning and seen functioning, which means we are here in this place. The place to engage in robust debate is, in fact, in the House of Commons. It's not Facebook, it's not Twitter, it's not the mainstream media, it's here. That is what our parliamentary system is based on. That is the historical nature of this place. That is what the health and prosperity of our country so much relies on. If members feel their work is non-essential, then I would suggest that they fail to understand their role and their responsibilities, and they ought not put their name on a ballot in the next election. This is not simply a place of process. It is a meeting ground where we use our minds and our skills to convince our political opponents of our positions. It is where we give impassioned speeches and where we vocally express our dissatisfaction with a less than sufficient government response. If we allow it to, the back and forth of exchange can actually produce excellence. One side puts forward a thesis, the other side puts forward an antithesis, and then the synthesis of ideas takes place. Mr. Speaker, that is what democracy is about. It's the exchange of ideas. When did we lose an appreciation for this? Diefenbaker famously said that Parliament is more than just procedure. It is the custodian of the nation's freedom. You see, the House of Commons is not some random place simply used to facilitate the goings-on of Parliament. It is a crucial part of upholding democracy with debate, scrutiny, opposition, and questioning of the government on all matters that affect the Canadian public. To characterize it as anything less than essential is an utter degradation of our Constitution and the fundamental freedoms for which our ancestors fought. At the very heart of democracy is the preservation of personal liberty, and the guardian of those liberties is Parliament. Mr. Speaker, again, there are 338 of us who have been given the grand privilege and the sobering responsibility of being in this place in order to represent Canadians. And if we are not here doing that, then who is? For the government to use this pandemic to avoid accountability and desire only to meet virtually, where dissent can literally be silenced by the click of a button, is unconscionable.
That's it. It's this doxing generation, and a lot of you people agree with it. I completely, disheartedly disagree with it. I want to hear the beliefs that I don't agree with. I'm Canadian.
How easy it is to be distracted from the real things going on before us. Indeed, the government must respond to the current pandemic and ensure the safety and security of Canadians. This is, in fact, the first responsibility of any government. But there is more taking place here than what meets the eye. The Prime Minister will take the media's questions from the comfort of his home, but he is unwilling to take questions from the people of Canada through their representatives right here in Parliament. The Prime Minister is willing to hand out money to individuals, to businesses, and to not-for-profits, but he demands something in return. The government wants the Canadian public to be informed, but only with the information that the government carefully curates. In March, the Liberals indicated that they are looking at the possibility of implementing legislation that would crack down on what they're calling misinformation. information that the government deems unhelpful. Further to this, the Heritage Minister recently confirmed that millions of dollars are being spent on censorship. No legislation was presented in this place, no debate took place here, and no discussion was had. The Liberals have crowned themselves now as the czar of what is true and what is false, what is acceptable and what is unacceptable, what gets to stay and what has to go. Since when is it the government's responsibility to arbitrate truth? This is not democracy, and these types of silly things are the things that happen when this place ceases to meet and when the official opposition is unable to hold the government to full account. This is a direct infringement of our freedom. I recognize that no one likes misinformation, but since when is it okay for the government to determine what is right and what gets to stay and what has to go, what is in and what is out? It is a massive overreach of power. I find this particularly unsettling given the fact that the current government is actually responsible for spreading some of the most dangerous misinformation that has been put out there. Canadians will recall that it was this government that initially propagated the false notion that COVID-19 couldn't be spread through human-to-human contact. That was proven false. It was the health minister that declared that closing Canada's borders wasn't necessary to protect Canadians, that COVID-19 would pass quickly. Well, that was false. And it was the government that misled the Canadian public into believing that masks over one's face weren't necessary, that it wouldn't be helpful. Well, that was false too. So if these aren't examples of misinformation, then I don't know what is. If the government is looking to crack down on COVID-19 unhelpful or misleading information, then they really don't need to look any further than in the mirror, or at least that's where they should start. The reality is the government doesn't have all of the answers. We're in this together, learning, discovering. Information is evolving. Free speech is a part of a thriving society. Free speech is what helps us maintain our fundamentals as a nation. It's how we share ideas. It's how we engage in creativity. It's how we advance. It's how we innovate. It's how we move forward. When did we become afraid of robust discussion? When did we become unable to disagree without being disagreeable? When were these ideals eradicated from our Canadian values, from the social fabric that makes up this country that we call home?
Now, this MP Harder doesn't speak too much, but when she does, she usually gives a very compelling speech, in my opinion. Not humble as it is. She has a little story here at the end. Leave your comments below. Do you believe that what you know of the Liberals, they're quelling free speech and not basically shutting down Parliament of all of its powers? Now watch this great story she has here.
There was this man who worked at a sawmill, and faithfully he would go to work day in and day out. And at the end of the week, on his Friday, he would exit the compound, and going past the security guard, he would be pushing a wheelbarrow full of sawdust. And the security guard would look at the wheelbarrow and say, "Excuse me, sir, what do you have in the wheelbarrow?" And he would say, "Just a little bit of sawdust." And the security guard would say, "Okay, no problem, go on through." And the next week, the same worker would come back to work on Monday and work faithfully, and Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday. Friday would come around and this worker would fill his wheelbarrow again with some sawdust and go past the security guard, and the security guard would ask him, "What do you have in your wheelbarrow, sir?" And the employee would say, "Just a bit of sawdust," and continue on his way. Well, this happened for several weeks. Finally, the security guard pulled him over one Friday and said, "Excuse me, if you don't mind me asking, what do you use the sawdust for?" The employee, not missing a beat, leans in and he whispers and says, "Can you hold a secret?" And the security guard says, "Sure." And the worker says, "I'm not taking the sawdust. I'm stealing wheelbarrows." Having convinced the security guard that he was simply taking sawdust, the man cleverly pushed his employer's wheelbarrow home, knowing a profit was to be made. Things are not
sourced by legitimate tech and scientific publications. What they say they are hearing is described as weird repeating signals. The technical term for this is fast radio bursts, FRBs. Here's, by the way, what they sound like. That's a pulsar, which is what an FRB or frequent radio burst